With you now here on the Newsfeed late night. The number of qualified chartered accountants remains alarmingly low in South Africa. Only 43% of the candidates who sat for the South African Institute of Chartered Accountants examination last December made it through. Added to this, only 24% of them were black. So the question becomes, should we be concerned about the number of students qualifying as chartered accountants, and should we be more concerned about the low number of black candidates? Joining me now to talk about this is Senior Executive of the National Projects at SAICA, Robert Zwane, and the National Head of Education for Abasa, Kuma Mjali. Good evening to you both, and thank you very much for your time. Robert, start with you. I mean, should we be concerned? It's a competency assessment, a professional competency assessment exam, which really seeks to establish whether the technical skill acquired, those who acquired it are able to apply it in a real life situation. The fact that the numbers have been so low, is that a concern?
Good evening, Thabo. It is a huge concern for us as the South African Institute of Chartered Accountants. Our goal, Thabo, is to produce CAs. That's our primary goal. And primary as well is to ensure that our CA numbers are reflective of the demographics of the country, and that is why we drive a number of transformation initiatives to ensure that we achieve that goal. And therefore, when we have candidates coming up, as we have seen over the last few years, Thabo, we have seen an increase in the numbers, whether it's at university and coming through to our training program. However, when we have the candidates coming through and not getting out of the system, we are very concerned. And this is something that really, really worries us. And this is something that we are driving to ensure that we look into what are possible causes that we could be addressing to ensure that this doesn't happen. But the concern, Thabo, is quite great because this also limits the movement of those candidates that didn't make it. Some of those candidates will be qualifying as CAs, will be looking at where to after this and all of those. So not just from the candidate's perspective, but also from ourselves as a nation. We want to see candidates getting out and getting exposure to other aspects of their lives. And therefore, when we are not transforming in that, the candidates are not succeeding, it concerns us quite a bit, Thabo.
Kuma, are we only being alarmed now? Is this an anomaly, or is this a pattern that has been happening for a while in this particular sector? And have we sought to intervene at any level?
Thank you for that, Thabo. I think I was listening to Robert saying that he's concerned, and I think we should be more than concerned because this pattern has existed for a number of years. I think it's just hit the ultimate low at this point, and it's getting a lot of focus. And I think as a country that has inherited an unequal society, what it actually also means is that we are even taking a further step backwards. I don't know if you saw the actual numbers. We're producing double the number of white CAs versus the actual African candidates. So we should really be more than concerned because the transformation agenda, I think, is at a huge, huge risk. So I think as Abasa, we have tried to put in certain interventions over the past years around mentorship, giving additional support to the candidates. But I think more needs to be done still in the space. And I think Robert spoke to doing a thorough investigation around understanding what the real issues are. But it's not a new issue. It's just worsened over the period, and we should be more than concerned about it.
What are those real issues, Kuma? I mean, is it as simple as what the one accountant here says, is that black students fear accounting? I mean, is it as simple as that?
We think that it's not as simple as that. Students are fearing accountants. There's a value chain, and we think that there's a number of touch points or areas where students are not getting appropriate exposure. So as a student, you come from a university, you go to a training firm, and the real question here is that what are we doing to support the African candidates as they are moving along this value chain? Are we equipping them with the right skills, and are we giving them the right exposure so that they can be successful in these kind of exams?
Yeah. Are they just merely being denied opportunity then? Are you saying they're being treated poorly in terms of being exposed to the right type of opportunities?
There are definitely concerns in that space. I think there are concerns around the equality of opportunities that are afforded to candidates in this entire value chain.
Robert, how does this affect the decision by SAICA to particularly sponsor black and colored accountants for study?
Tabo, that makes that decision even more important. As Thomas mentioned, that there's a value chain. Part of that value chain, Tabo, is for us to understand that if we are to grow the number of CAs, we have to actually go back to the basic of levels in terms of basic education and look at how we get learners interested in accounting and take it further and say, how do we support learners once they're at university? And that is why, Tabo, we run quite a number of programs that are intended to get learners interested into accounting, one, but also to get learners from places where they normally wouldn't be given or afforded such an opportunity. And that is why that decision to still sponsor only African and colored students is quite an important one, Tabo, because at this moment, those groups are the ones that are not very represented on a good level. And therefore, we still need to support those students. And part of what Tuma touched on is to make sure that we are not only supporting students by saying, here's money, go study. We need to understand the student's background. We need to understand the student's environment in terms of what they require to create a reasonable chance of success. And therefore, that is why part of the bursary program that we run, Tabo, is ensuring that there's wraparound support, well-rounded wraparound support for those students. So we hold the universities to account with a number of aspects that we want them to ensure. We also put in place a certain amount of percentage pass rates that the universities must achieve annually. That decision, Tabo, is something that we cannot undo anytime soon, because the road to us transforming our membership statistics is still quite long ahead. So we really need to invest even more into our students. But what is becoming clear, Tabo, is that we need not just a bursary program at a university level. If we are to support candidates properly, we have to understand what is happening at a school level, what is happening at a university level, what is happening when they get to their training, so that we better deal with anything that can be a hindrance to our African candidates succeeding towards their journey as CAs.
Yes. What needs to change, Kuma, in the value chain, maybe even in the qualifications process, particularly also, I mean, if we look at the number of women chartered accountants and raising that number as well in the continued implementation of these initiatives and supports?
I think quite simply for me, the equality of opportunities needs to change. So we need to be more, I think, intentional about how we are giving exposure to particular candidates. And I think a very quick example of this is, particular corporates go to particular universities to go and recruit, but they should actually be thinking of the universities that are not as well off to go recruit. So being intentional about giving these candidates equal opportunities and exposure, I think, in this value chain is what needs to change.
Yeah, and are all the stakeholders sitting around the table talking about it, including industry and where they go source talent?
I think at this point in time, everybody is concerned. The profession at large is concerned. As a BASA, we had a press conference last week where we had a lot of these stakeholders on the table. So the discussions are being had, and I think the stakeholders all understand that we have to be intentional about how we give opportunities in this value chain in order to ensure that there's equal success, chances of success for African candidates.
Well, Robert, I suppose the other part of this conversation would also be a conversation which is also playing a role here, the state of our schools and our education system as a whole and the output that comes from there.
Absolutely, Tabo. That's something that's so important. And if you look at the aspects that are going to a basic education level, let's just mention maybe just two issues, Tabo. Look at the quality of maths and the number of learners that are passing maths with a 60% as a minimum, because mathematics, pure mathematics, is a gateway subject to so many careers that are occupations in high demand. If we don't look at those issues, that number will keep declining. As that number keeps declining, we are then going to be affected even further, because those students that are going to be affected will most assuredly be the African students. And again, generally, we get so many learners that says, I'm very good at accounting. I've just passed accounting very well, but they have paired their accounting with maths literacy. So that is why there is a need for us to go back to the ground roots level and ensure that information is getting to the most rural of South Africa. As Tuma mentioned, that we need our entities to be intentional around recruiting at specific universities, or those universities that have candidates that might be coming from backgrounds that are not so privileged. We also have to be intentional about reaching an African child from the most rural of areas and ensuring that we are supporting them, we are showing them the possibilities around such careers. And that is why, Thabo, that part of what we do within SAICA through our Tutuka program is we play a hugely important advocacy role of promoting mathematics at a high school. We also partner with the Department of Education and promote mathematics. If I may share, Thabo, just this year, we had a number of learners that were afforded our Tutuka bursary through our partnerships with our partnership with the Department of Basic Education. So the foundation level is so very much key. Just yesterday, we were talking around the issue of development and creating an environment from as early as possible that allows a learner to be thinking about things critically, to be thinking about things outside the box, if I may put it like that, to be able to actually also take learning to be a personal responsibility as well. And what that requires is learners must be coached, learners must be mentored from as early as possible. That cannot start when people are doing their articles. That cannot start when they get to university. Because when you get to university, there's no longer that kind of a personal touch, that kind of a closeness to a student. So it's very, very important that we as a country actually come together and look at what is it that we can play as a role to ensure that those issues that are at a basic education level are addressed.
Kuma, it's a sad thing in South Africa that we actually have to spell this out for a certain part of society, maybe even industry, right? They'll say capability and talent has got no color. Why does it even matter that we're saying we need to get more black chartered accountants?
I think when we started at the beginning, we spoke about the current demographics of the profession. So we inherited, I think, a profession that had majority white members, and it's very, very important that I think we get those numbers to basically look a little bit more equal and to reflect the demographics of this country. And true, talent has no color, but we've got some catching up to do, I think, as the African race that was, I think, disadvantaged further on. But yeah, I think talent has no color, but unfortunately we've inherited a system that was divided by color.
I appreciate both of you for coming through tonight. That is the executive of National Projects at SAICA, Robert Zwane, and National Head of Education at Abasa, Kuma Mjali. The Newsfeed Late Night continues next. We'll update you on what's making news as we look at your headlines next.